here. I don't have too much stuff on my TikTok stream. Just checking to make sure all the streams are running here. Let's pop this up here. Close that. Okay, I got you. Thank you. Think I'm streaming. Just some stories. Got stuff to talk about, as always. Looks like everything's working the way it is supposed to, so that's good news. Let's just pop in here real quick. We'll switch this over so we can take a look at the news, the things that need to be said. You know, for those of you who don't know, this is the Brian for Liberty podcast. I am... Let's do this. For those of you who don't know, this is the Brian for Liberty podcast. For those of you who are new here, or for those of you who are here, period, I'm running this on YouTube and Facebook, and it'll get uploaded to Spotify as audio later. But I just wanted to run through a couple of quick stories, talk about a few things that just kind of popped out of me today, including some stupid stuff on Twitter, which is always fun. I want to start with right here with Janet Yellen. And it's one of those deals where you want to believe, right? That's right. You want to actually believe that there are people in very important positions are actively doing the right thing, or you want some level, at least, of non-bias, right? You want it to be, and if you're going to get bias, which obviously there are going to be circumstances where things are not going to be completely unbiased. Everybody has an opinion, but you want to some extent to be able to have something put in front of you and almost not, it almost insults your intelligence because it's so clearly and obviously. So let's see, we'll do some news of the day. Just punching up some stuff here. Okay. And boom. That should be it. Let's take a look. Okay. So for some reason, the Facebook stuff it's always like a pain to get the Facebook stuff started. Anywho. Now I'm there. Okay. Kill that. Move this over. Should be... Okay. So, anyway, Janet Yellen says Biden's China tariffs are strategic. Trump's would raise costs. I mean, you don't have to like Donald Trump. Oh my God, you don't have to like Donald Trump. You can agree that we need to tariff China. You can think whatever you want to think, but for Pete's sake, can we have something that just says, I am giving an unbiased opinion. This reminds me a little bit of the protests from when the Trump rallies were called super spreader events and the BLM protests were called, it was safe. It was okay to do the protests, but it wasn't okay to go to a Trump rally. That's what this reminds me of. Yellen says Biden's China tariffs are strategic. Trump's would raise cost. She does make a mild point here. U.S. Secretary Janet Yellen on Thursday defended President Joe Biden's increased tariffs on certain Chinese goods as highly strategic, but said Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's tariff proposals would be much broader and raise costs for consumers. All tariffs raise costs for consumers. All of them do. There's a piece the other day where they were correctly attacking Donald Trump and saying that he's claiming that China pays these tariffs. Well, China doesn't pay the tariffs. The tariffs are paid by, it's us, the American consumer pays for tariffs. So Yellen told a news briefing in Atlanta that Biden's new tariffs are aimed at protecting electric vehicles, solar energy products, and semiconductors from excess Chinese capacity created by Beijing's overinvestment. The administration refuses to allow U.S. firms in these sectors to be put out of business by coordinated Chinese dumping of exports, she said. So Biden is all tariffs are predominantly a protection racket, right? That's what they're doing. That's why we have tariffs, is to protect our businesses from, essentially to protect business from competition. That's what's going on, and that is always bad for the consumer. It always raises costs for the consumer. But what gets me about this is that the headline, there's no problem, there's no issue here with the headline just flat out saying that, hey, Donald Trump's tariffs are this horrible holistic thing that's going to raise costs. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's are strategic and intelligent, and it's so in the bag is what my problem is. It's like, can we just be honest and unbiased about an opinion? And the answer is obviously no, we cannot. We have to. It's always there. And so this one was just kind of to get the ball rolling. I just wanted to talk about this real quick and just wanted to point out that tariffs are bad, trade wars are bad. When goods don't cross borders, armies do. This trade war we're trying to start with China is a horrible idea. The United States is losing its dollar hegemony. That's going away. We're not going to be the world's reserve currency in this sole position that we have been and we've gotten so used to for so long. So we need to start figuring out how we're going to work with the global economic community from an equal position as opposed to a position of dominance, which we've gotten so used to. So the idea that we're going to tariff these things, and the fact that both of our presidential candidates, both Biden and I shouldn't say candidate, Biden is the president of the United States, but both of these guys are in favor of tariffs. And man, that's a real issue. That this horrible economic idea is popular amongst both Democrats and Republicans. So it's just a sad thing. Let's get this out of here. This one killed me just because it popped up today. And I'm doing this because we just had the Cheapfakes, right? We just had, was it MSNBC's? A couple of different, they're upset, essentially. Let me pull this back up here. They're upset because the Fox News right-wing media is altering videos. They're trimming videos. They're not giving context. And they're doing it in order to make Joe Biden look like a doddering old fool who shouldn't be in the White House. And, he's lost his mental capacity and all this, that, and the other. And they're very upset about that. And so I just found it funny that, first, let me just say this. If Joe Biden was clearly in control of his mental faculties, if Joe Biden was not mentally diminished, then cheap fakes like this wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to just fool people by putting up a couple of videos and saying that a certain thing was happening. This isn't going to happen to a Gavin Newsom. It's not going to happen to Vivek Ramaswamy. It's not going to happen to the young, vigorous men and women who have run. It's not going to happen to a Tulsi Gabbard, right? It's not going to happen to, so the point is that the reason these cheap fakes work, or the reason that the Democrats are concerned about these cheap fakes, is because Biden's clearly diminished. He's clearly got a problem. There's clearly an issue with his mental capacity. It's obvious when he's speaking that he's not as sharp as he once was, that he's greatly diminished. And it's okay to be somewhat concerned. This isn't saying that Donald Trump is not also suffering from a decline in his mental acuity. But I would say if you watch the two men speak, and we got a debate coming up, which I don't know what in the world is going to happen. I swear to God, if the debate actually happens, I'm going to be stunned. I really did not think that a debate was even going to take place between these two guys. My point being that it's interesting to me that we have the two men that we're going to have running for president of the United States, the two primary parties in this race, put two people up who we could clearly have significant questions, even about their mental capacity and their ability to lead. My point being that these cheap fakes with Joe Biden wouldn't work if he was, obviously and clearly in control of his faculties. So that's a serious problem. It's something serious. But back to the Snopes thing, I think it's fine. It's funny that the Democrats and MSNBC and the left they're all up in arms over these cheap fakes, and you're putting out this fake information to try and make it look like, our guy isn't capable of doing this, that, and the other. And at the end of the day, Snopes, a fact-checking website, issued a correction for the infamous "very fine people" line Trump used, as well as had used against him 7 years later. 7 years later, Snopes finally makes this correction. And for most of you out there probably already know this, but Donald Trump, after the Charlotte protests, and there were white supremacists there, and there were racists and neo-Nazis and all this kind of stuff out at this protest, but there were people who were intellectuals. Let's not get carried away with the intellectuals, but there are people on both sides of this thing, very fine people, who have an honest disagreement, a genuine disagreement, that where there's a place for discussion when it comes to removing statues and monuments and taking stuff down. And there are people who want to preserve this stuff, and there are people who want to take it down. And I think both sides of that argument have some valid points. And that is essentially what Donald Trump was saying in this speech. And it's relatively infamous now. If you don't know, if you're still living in a world where he called neo-Nazis very fine people, or didn't condemn not white supremacists, if you're still living in that world, then you've got to get out of your echo chamber. But Snopes is finally, 7 years later, correcting this. And it was one of the biggest fakes perpetrated by mainstream media, right going into the election, where Donald Trump, MSNBC, I believe, was the first one. Maybe it was CNN, but it seemed like all the major media outlets specifically cut out the portion where he's trying to explain what I just explained, that there are people who want to preserve these monuments and there are people who want to tear them down. And as he's explaining this, he's saying not the neo-Nazis, not white supremacists should be condemned, and da-da-da-da. When he's talking about very fine people, it's very evident who he was talking to. And they specifically edited the clip to make it look like he said something he didn't say. And it's amazing to me. This is the problem when you have media that's just carrying the bag for a particular one side or the other. And let me just see something here. So it's interesting to me that that's going to be. Now they're so upset, and MSNBC and they're so upset, and cheap fakes and this, that, and the other. The problem is that you have media outlets, you have multiple media outlets that you simply cannot trust. And that, to me, that's the sad thing. The sad thing is that you can't trust any of your media anymore because they're in the bag for their political. There is no objective journalism. Everything is an opinion. Everything is, these are our people, and we're not going to criticize them. We're going to defend them at all costs, and that's unfortunate. But it's pretty funny to me that Snopes finally, 7 years later, comes out and makes this correction. I thought that was pretty amusing. What do we got here?
Obviously, this debate is going to be huge.
I do not care about the debate that's coming up. What else do I got in here? Oh, no, Nancy Pelosi. Today we celebrate 50 years of Title IX. Title IX, the groundbreaking legislation that made sure that women would have access to sports, athletics, whatever, on equal footing with men. And right under it, on Twitter, man, the internet's undefeated. Right underneath it, today is Biden inserts gender identity into Title IX, adding biological males to the women's rights laws. So, yes, Title IX, essentially a law that was created to make sure that women had their own space to be able to participate in sport, is now open to biological males. And as long as you call yourself a woman, you can participate in women's sports. So Title IX is effectively dead, and women no longer have a space of their own to compete in sports. They have to compete against men. A man just has to say that he's a woman. And this is the insanity. This is like young, I would say, young 20s, ultra liberal, ultra progressive women undoing the work that their mothers and grandmothers did, right, to get them to a place where they couldn't hang on to it for a generation. 52 years, I guess it's more than a generation, but it's really sad to me because I think that women need a place to participate in sport. I think that women's sport is important. And I think that girls need a place where they can go and compete. Competition maybe is a little bit more naturally ingrained in young men than it is in young women. But teamwork, competition, fair play, good sportsmanship. And these aren't just things that young boys need to learn. It's things that young girls need to learn. And I think damaging girls' sports in this way is, to me, it's a pretty sad thing. And I think it's really arrogant of Nancy Pelosi to come out and say something like that. I mean, in lieu of how the Democrats are approaching this particular issue, I guess I wouldn't be taking a victory lap on Title IX if I were Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats. I guess that's what I would say about that. Oh, here's the story. Here's the cheap fake stuff. I missed it. Mad Owl blog. Cheap fakes get an indefensible boost from GOP. So, like I was saying earlier, they're so upset about the cheap fakes. But anyway, the moment has passed, if you will. Let's see what else we got here. That's it. That's about all I got on that stuff. That's fun. Anyway, I hadn't done one of these in a minute, and I just wanted to get on here. I'm still working through some of the technology and just trying to get better at just doing the thing, to be honest with you, in regards to getting on here and just having chats. I am also having some issues with, I'm trying to figure out if I could be live in two places at once with TikTok, and I did have another story here that I thought was pretty interesting. Chicago's Teachers Union. Let me blow this one up. Chicago's Teachers Union. I'm really getting tired of like the schools are so underfunded nonsense. Let's just take a peek at this particular story. Chicago Teachers Union demands $1.7 billion for librarians, climate champions, and gender support coordinators. Yes, indeed. This is IllinoisPolicy.org. The Chicago Teachers Union demanded each of the 623 Chicago schools hire multiple new positions, including librarians, nothing wrong with that, climate champions, and gender support coordinators. Even nearly empty schools will be required to hire these extra staffers. The Chicago Teachers Union wants at least one librarian and librarian's assistant in each of the schools. I'd like to see a librarian in every school. I'd like to think that every school has a library. Climate champions and gender support coordinators maybe something different. A total of 4,650 new positions. Total cost of $1.7 billion. That's on top of what Chicago already spends to employ current teachers, staff, and administrators, an amount driving a projected $391 million deficit in the coming school year. Jesus. In the case of Douglas Academy High School, the demands would add at least 8 staff members to the current roster of 23 full-time employees, 31 staffers to educate 35 students. Douglas Academy is not the only severely underpopulated school. What are these schools even doing still open? First of all, we're maintaining these facilities for what? We're maintaining a facility for, I don't know how big this academy is, but I mean, what is going on here? Librarian, obviously social worker, newcomer liaison, case manager, restorative justice coordinator, reading specialist, and interventionist. I like that. 3 elective teachers. That's good. A climate champion, gender support coordinator, LGBTQ plus lead specialist, and option to expand LGBTQ faculty support teams at each school. Because of the minimum staffing requirements laid out in the contract, this will constitute a minimum of 4,650 new hires. Jesus H. And here you go. This is the thing that always gets me. And the spending number here is probably not inflation adjusted. So I'm going to acknowledge that out of the gate. This is not a problem. Our underperforming schools are not underperforming because they're not properly funded. That's not the issue. I've said it a million times, and everybody knows it. It's like the worst kept. It's not even a secret. I mean, everybody knows that the United States spends more per capita to educate our kids than anybody else is spending, and we are not getting the bang for our buck. And what's interesting is that the left will talk about all the time that we are spending, how much more we're spending on healthcare than everybody else is spending. That's a pretty common complaint of the left, is we spend all this money on healthcare and we hear all these bad results we're getting. But they don't look at public schools that way. They don't look at the school, hey, why are we spending all this money and not getting a decent return on this massive investment that we're making? That never comes into play. That's never part of the equation. So I find that that's disappointing, I guess, would be the way I would describe it. That we aren't doing a better job criticizing because the way it gets framed is if you criticize the public school system, then you are going to you're opposed. You know, you're opposed to kids. You don't want to pay for the kids, and you know, if it when it comes to the children, man, when it comes to the children, there's really not much you can do. You gotta that's how they're gonna get you. They'll beat you over the head with it, to do whatever they can to get you to lay out the money. So it just drives me nuts because we're always in this. Our schools are so underfunded and there's no money, and that's just flat out not true. It's just not a true statement. So that's pretty sad stuff. What else do I got here? That might be about it. Let's see here. We got the teachers union, and that's about the tall and short of it, I think, for today. I just wanted to pop on real quick and get a run on this. I will have more tomorrow. We're going to end that one, and we'll end this thing on the YouTube, as I like to call it. And I think I go to OBS and kill all of this.